But I said to Prime Minister Netanyahu, I believe that the current situation in the Middle East does not allow for procrastination. I also believe that real friends talk openly and honestly with one another. So I want to share with you some of what I said to the Prime Minister. Here are the facts we all must confront. First, the number of Palestinians living west of the Jordan River is growing rapidly and fundamentally reshaping the demographic realities of both Israel and the Palestinian territories. This will make it harder and harder, without a peace deal, to maintain Israel as both a Jewish state and a democratic state. Second, technology will make it harder for Israel to defend itself in the absence of a genuine peace. Third, a new generation of Arabs is reshaping the region. A just and lasting peace can no longer be forged with one or two Arab leaders. Going forward, millions of Arab citizens have to see that peace is possible for that peace to be sustained. And just as the context has changed in the Middle East, so too has it been changing in the international community over the last several years. There's a reason why the Palestinians are pursuing their interests at the United Nations. They recognize that there is an impatience with the peace process, or the absence of one, not just in the Arab world, in Latin America, in Asia, and in Europe. And that impatience is growing, and it's already manifesting itself in capitals around the world. And those are the facts. I firmly believe, and I repeated on Thursday, that peace cannot be imposed on the parties to the conflict. No vote at the United Nations will ever create an independent Palestinian state, and the United States will stand up against efforts to single Israel out at the United Nations or in any international forum. Israel's legitimacy is not a matter for debate. That is my commitment. That is my pledge to all of you. Moreover, we know that peace demands a partner, which is why I said that Israel cannot be expected to negotiate with Palestinians who do not recognize its right to exist. And we will hold the Palestinians accountable for their actions and for their rhetoric. But the march to isolate Israel internationally and the impulse of the Palestinians to abandon negotiations will continue to gain momentum in the absence of a credible peace process and alternative. And for us to have leverage with the Palestinians, to have leverage with the Arab states and with the international community, the basis for negotiations has to hold out the prospect of success. And so, in advance of a 5-day trip to Europe, in which the Middle East will be a topic of acute interest, I chose to speak about what peace will require. There was nothing particularly original in my proposal. This basic framework for negotiations has long been the basis for discussions among the parties, including previous U.S. administrations. But since questions have been raised, let me repeat what I actually said on Thursday, not what I was reported to have said. I said that the United States believes that negotiations should result in two states, with permanent Palestinian borders with Israel, Jordan, and Egypt, and permanent Israeli borders with Palestine. The borders of Israel and Palestine should be based on the 1967 lines with mutually agreed swaps, so that secure and recognized borders are established for both states. The Palestinian people must have the right to govern themselves and reach their potential in a sovereign and contiguous state. As for security, every state has the right to self-defense. And Israel must be able to defend itself by itself against any threat. Provisions must also be robust enough to prevent a resurgence of terrorism, to stop the infiltration of weapons, and to provide effective border security. And a full and phased withdrawal of Israeli military forces should be coordinated with the assumption of Palestinian security responsibility in a sovereign and non-militarized state. And the duration of this transition period must be agreed. And the effectiveness of security arrangements must be demonstrated. Now, that is what I said. And it was my reference to the 1967 lines with mutually agreed swaps that received the lion's share of the attention, including just now. And since my position has been misrepresented several times, let me reaffirm what 1967 lines with mutually agreed swaps means. By definition, it means that the parties themselves, Israelis and Palestinians, will negotiate a border that is different than the one that existed on June 4th, 1967. That's what mutually agreed upon swaps means. It is a well-known formula to all who have worked on this issue for a generation. It allows the parties themselves to account for the changes that have taken place over the last 44 years. It allows the parties themselves to take account of those changes, including the new demographic realities on the ground and the needs of both sides. The ultimate goal is 2 states for 2 people. Israel as a Jewish state and the homeland for the Jewish people, and the state of Palestine as the homeland for the Palestinian people. Each state enjoying self-determination, mutual recognition, and peace.
Joining me now, the chief Palestinian representative to the United States, Maen Areikat, and thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let me first just your general impressions of this speech.
Well, I think it once again represents the commitment of the president and the administration to pursue peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. The Palestinian leadership highly appreciates the continued commitment shown by the president on Thursday and today, and we hope that the administration will be able to translate this genuine desire to end the conflict to some practical steps.
And I want to play you something he said, because I want to ask you where the Palestinians stand on certain things that the president said. And the first one is about Fatah and Hamas. So this is what he had to say.
The recent agreement between Fatah and Hamas poses an enormous obstacle to peace. No country can be expected to negotiate with a terrorist organization sworn to its destruction.
What's the way around this, then?
Well, first of all, the reconciliation agreement that was signed on May 4th in Cairo.
Between, just to let between Fatah and Hamas. And Hamas, we should say, the United States and Israel and others consider Hamas to be a terrorist organization, and they say that until Hamas recognizes Israel's right to exist and eschews violence, that Israel will not deal with them. So you've made a May agreement with Hamas.
The May agreement did not call for the creation of a national unity government, as many have been saying here in this country. It calls specifically for the formation of an independent technocrat government that will prepare for national elections in May 2012 and help in the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip. The PLO, under the chairmanship of President Abbas, will continue to be in charge of the negotiation with Israel and of the political file. So there is not going to be any changes in the course or policies of the PLO and the Palestinian Authority until those elections are held in May 2012.
But it looks as though with this agreement that Hamas would have influence on these negotiations. If you have, we all know that when people make alliances, those alliances make differences in policies. So it seems from the Israeli point of view, as I understand it, that this is an alliance that the U.S. and Israel cannot deal with.
I think that's why we are calling for the elections. We want the Palestinian people to choose their leaders and their representatives in May 2012. You know, this democratic process has been held hostage to the divisions between Fatah and Hamas. It is time to allow the Palestinian people to choose their representatives. And hopefully come May 2012, the Palestinian people will be able to choose those representatives who will continue to advocate a peaceful resolution to the conflict with Israel. The PLO has committed itself to a negotiated settlement with Israel, has recognized Israel in the past, and once Hamas joins the PLO, it will be a faction within the PLO. It doesn't mean that they will be the predominant voice among the other PLO factions.
Right, but it would be a voice if they were elected in a integral government.
And this is a democratic choice. The Palestinian people have to make that choice in the elections of May 2012. Before we reconciled with Hamas, Israel used the pretext of Palestinian divisions to say, who should we talk to? The government of the West Bank or the government of the Gaza Strip? Now, after we united, or we are planning to become a united voice, which I think will be a positive factor in helping the Palestinians reach a historical agreement with Israel to end the conflict and end all claims.
Would the PLO urge Hamas to reject violence and to agree that Israel should be recognized?
We have been doing that. I mean, that's one big...
As a condition?
We have been doing that for the last few years. That was a big reason why we had reached the stage that we reached a few years ago, the division, because we did not agree to their tactics in realizing the Palestinian national objectives. Secondly, ever since that agreement has been signed to reconcile, we have seen and heard more pragmatic, practical, moderate statements coming out from Hamas leaders. Now we have to see how much they will shift to adopt the overall PLO policy.
September turns out to be another kind of watermark in the Middle East peace process. And I want to play something that President Obama said about what we expect to be Palestinian push in the UN this September to be recognized as a state. And here's what the president had to say.
No vote at the United Nations will ever create an independent Palestinian state, and the United States will stand up against efforts to single Israel out at the United Nations or in any international forum.
So I take that to mean I think that the United States would not go for, and indeed the president has been saying this is not a good idea because simply declaring that Palestine is a state does not make it so on the ground. Why exacerbate?
Well, let me clarify 2 points. One, we are not in the business of delegitimizing Israel. On the contrary, we have recognized Israel in 1988, 1993, 96, 98, unequivocally. We are in the business of legitimizing a Palestinian state. We don't want to cancel any state out. We want to put a new state on the path, which is the state of Palestine. And this is exactly what President Obama said last year at the UN General Assembly. He said, when we go back this year, hopefully we will see a new member state, the state of Palestine. Secondly, the Palestinians are not saying that this is our only option. We have said repeatedly, President Abbas has said repeatedly, that if the atmosphere is conducive to a genuine resumption of negotiations based on clear terms of reference, time frame, end game, which to us is the end of the military occupation, the Israeli military occupation, the establishment of a Palestinian state, the Palestinians are willing to engage. So it's not the only option available to us. We prefer to continue the political process, but as the president also alluded in his speech, he said that the Palestinians are going to the UN with the support of the international community out of frustration and impatience that this bilateral process did not produce anything. What we have seen, increase in settlements, increase of facts on the ground, and the hope for peace is becoming more remote.
So you could see a circumstance under which that UN effort could be delayed if you saw something, if somehow on the ground you saw real action toward a process.
We need to see measures and steps on the part of the Israelis that they are genuine and sincere about ending the conflict of us. Instead of nationalist ideological slogans, we need to replace that of a genuine search for peace and an end to the conflict in the region.